The Buffalo Sabres are one of two NHL teams who are starting the season overseas. Joe DiBiase of Locked On Sabres is here to talk about that, the team's new captain, and the overall outlook for the new season. All that and more next on today's NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Sabres, Joe DiBiase. And Joe, an exciting time for the Sabres right now. Talk to me about the ramifications of starting this season off in Germany.
So it's a little unique. I mean, they just played an exhibition game against Red Bull Munich, and a German team with a couple of former NHL players and a couple of prospect guys, but certainly a team that you're not really getting NHL caliber reps against, but still kind of a cool experience. You get some ice time over there before the season got rolling. I think really the biggest ramification and the biggest curiosity, uniqueness to going overseas like this is NHL training camps are short. It's not like football where you have 2 months of buildup sometimes before the start of a season. The Sabres showed up to training camp like a week ago, and it was, all right, we got 5 days until we're on a plane heading for Germany. So honestly, the biggest ramifications might have been there were young players that could have had an opportunity to make this NHL team that really didn't, because Lindy Ruff had to show up and basically say, all right, all our NHL guys are practicing over here, all our AHL guys are practicing over here, and there really was no intermingling. Then they left, and some of their lower level prospect guys that could have surprised didn't really get a shot. But otherwise, a lot of team building, I'm sure. I saw some pictures of the squad going over to Oktoberfest today. So as long as they don't have too much fun, I think the team building exercise is the big value there.
No question about that. And then how does it affect the schedule after you come back from Europe?
That's probably the biggest thing, honestly. Like Lindy Ruff talked about that a little bit too, that it's not really as big a thought when you think of, oh, you're going overseas and how your training camp's conducted and, you know, the atmosphere of the game is an impact. But really the biggest impact on your season might be you're flying back from Europe and getting readjusted to the time zones. So the NHL did at least those teams a favor, the Sabres, the Devils, of giving them a 4 or 5 day break between that day and then a couple of home games at the start, so you don't have to go right back out on the road when you get back. So we'll have to see how big an impact it really has on them, but I do think that 4 or 5 day stretch with home games at the start should help insulate their return a little bit, but it's something to watch for sure.
Now, there's also a new captain in Buffalo. Talk to me about that and what it means for this team.
Yeah, so Rasmus Dahlin is named the captain of this hockey team, and around here, that was not a big surprise. I think we were all just kind of waiting to see when they would announce that. And then 4 alternates to go along with them. Really, the team getting turned over to this young core that, hey, so far they've disappointed, but a lot of these guys have developed individually really well. They're ready to take the team over. Dahlin is a vocal leader at this point. Dahlin is, to me, one of those guys that I didn't really expect this when they drafted him. When they drafted him, he was a 6'2", pretty thin, not very physical, one-dimensional offensive defenseman that you thought could grow into a lot of elements in his offensive game and his defensive game. That's how he showed up. 5 years later, he is as well-rounded as it gets. This guy's worked on his shot, which was a problem coming in. He has become... Go look up a montage of Rasmus Dahlin hits. He's got some of the biggest bone-crushing hits in the league in the last couple of years, and I would have never predicted that would have been a part of his game. Dahlin is the first guy. There was a play last year where Dylan Cousins, or it was Tage Thompson, got run along the wall. Who's the guy that went in after TJ Oshie? on the Washington Capitals. It was Rasmus Dahlin. He is the guy that will stick up for teammates. He'll deliver the checks. He'll set the tone physically. He's also probably their best all-around player. So I think it says a lot about how Dahlin has grown because it wasn't all roses. A couple years in, it looked like there could be a problem, that maybe even the word bust would get thrown around. And from really year 2, when that was happening, to now, he's grown in every single element of his game and as a leader.
Obviously, the Sabres have missed the playoffs the last few years, and they've been one of those teams that a lot of people said, oh, this is the year. This is the year they get over the hump, get back to the playoffs. They've got some young talent. What are your biggest concerns and biggest reasons for optimism heading into this new season?
Yeah, Gil, I think I said 6 times that this will be the year that they do it. Really, the way it works, I think one of those years where you don't expect them to make it is when it's going to happen. And maybe that's this year a little bit. I think the expectation is that they'll probably fall a little bit short, but they'll be a team that's on the bubble. They'll be competitive. Would it be a major shock if they found their way into a wild card spot? I don't think so. If they found their way to a top 3 position in this division with Toronto and Florida and Boston and Tampa, I mean, that would be a wow. But what I think holds them back from being in that company of those 4 elite teams in the division right now is I don't really trust the goal scoring. It's been different in the past. There have been other years where, oh man, I don't know about their goaltending or their blue line looks really tough. Right now, the goaltending looks great. The Jukka-Pekka Luukkonen showed up as a number 1. Devin Levi actually had a great year of development. He was a little up and down in the NHL in 20-some games last year, but then he went down to Rochester as a 21-year-old, first year of pro hockey, and was second in the AHL in save percentage. I think that's a pretty good year of development, and he's your number 2, so that's hopeful. Your blue line is pretty loaded at this point, but all of a sudden, the team that was number 3 in the league in goals 2 years ago doesn't have a 60-point third-line center anymore in Casey Middlestat. They don't have a 25 to 35 goal scorer on the wing in Jeff Skinner. They don't have, 2 years ago, they had a 28 goal scorer on the third line in Victor Olofsson. And they've replaced those guys with, I think, decent hockey players, but what have they replaced them with? Responsible, two-way defensive players. That's okay. It's the way they want to play, a little bit more hard-nosed, responsible in your own end. But what I'm worried that they have sacrificed a little bit too much is the goal scoring. If they don't get Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, and J.J. Peterka, Jack Quinn to really carry the load at the top, I think they're going to have a big problem putting goals in the back of the net this year.
Can the power play make up for some of the lack of scoring depth 5-on-5?
I'm optimistic of that. They were a bad power play team last year, no doubt about it. But I think a lot of it was coaching from their assistant coach, Matt Ellis. It was just such a dry power play. All 5 guys go stand in your spot, and we'll pass it around and hope somebody comes open. No movement, no fluidity at all to the power play, and they've completely changed that. Everyone's moving around, they're cycling, and I do think that they have a better system in place for their power play. I think Jeff Skinner, he was a great 5-on-5 goal scorer. This has actually been his whole career. Great 5-on-5 scorer, has never been good on the power play. And the Sabres asked him to play in the top power play unit last year. Now he's gone, and J.J. Peterka is on that top unit. I think that will help as well. Bo Byram having another good quarterback for a full season on the second unit, I think, will help. So I'm glad you mentioned the power play, because that is the one thing where, you know what, that might work. That equation might work where, all right, you're middle of the pack to even below average when it comes to 5-on-5 scoring, but your power play figures it out, then you could have enough to actually make the playoffs.
Do you have one player who may surprise some people that maybe casual fans are not aware of heading into the season?
The guy I'd want to say, I don't know how off the radar he would be for everybody, but watch out for Zach Benson. Like, Zach Benson, again, he's not a no-name. He was a first-round pick, and he made some headlines when he made the team last year. How often does a player not picked in the top 10 make his team out of his first training camp? Usually that's reserved for the first picks, the second picks. Very, very rarely do you see a 13th pick do that. And what's strange about Benson doing it is what's most common when a guy at 18 makes a team, I think, is, oh, he must be producing offensively. 5'9", right? Like 160. He's a small player. Oh, he must have been lighting the lamp. What's funny is Benson actually didn't produce a lot of offense last year. He was not that dangerous. amazing to me, he made the team based on his maturity as a player, his hockey sense, his two-way game. He was playing. You didn't see Zach Benson on the power play last year. You don't want to know where he saw him all year long? The penalty kill. So to me, it's a good sign that he kind of made the team and stuck all year because he was giving them that two-way game that you usually are working to get out of an 18-year-old. Now you're seeing the skating got a little bit better. He put on a little bit more muscle. I think you're seeing him starting to thrive a little bit more with the offensive game, which is why he got drafted 13th overall. And I think marrying his offensive nature that wasn't able to come out last year, just because I don't think he was physically up to it, with his hockey IQ, which to me it's off the charts. It's going to be a thing about him for the next 5 to 10 years in the NHL, is how smart a player he is. You combine those two things, right now he's on their second line. It was going to be a battle between him and Jason Zucker to be in that top 6, and from like the second practice on, it's been all Zach Benson, and he hasn't moved off it. So yeah, keep an eye on Benson. You could absolutely see a breakout season for him, even though he's still only 19 years old.
Joe, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Absolutely. You can find me Locked On Sabres wherever you're listening to this podcast, whatever feed. You can find me on YouTube as well, and then on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports. If you can manage some hot Bills takes along the way with my Sabres coverage too.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite feature on the Game Time app remains the view from your seat. When you sign into the app, you could see a panoramic view from your seat before you buy the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.